Welcome back to our channel 217 Prince White. The chapter begins, but before its weapon can reach, Suho's hand slams it into the earth. Blood spurts. Bones give way. He turns his head, gaze locked on the growing crowd of enemies circling like wolves. Dark silhouettes close in around him. Blades are raised. Spears glint with venomous intent. And then, he appears. Out from the crowd steps a towering figure, heavy with menace and the weight of command. A cloak of bone and ragged furs hangs from his shoulders. Crimson eyes sear through the veil of smoke. This is no ordinary foe. Goblin leader, the title hangs in the air like a death sentence. The battle has just evolved. The interface flickers. HP 160/190. He grits his teeth, sweat gleaming across his brow. It hurts. The pain is real. This isn't a simulation, and the enemies surrounding him are far from weak. Goblins snarl and scream, raising jagged weapons above their heads. Their ferocity surges. Suho's breath steadies. His grip tightens around his blade. The battle has only begun. A flash of radiant blue mana bursts behind Suho as he slides low beneath an enemy's blade. His eyes burn with precision, his dagger slashing upward in a brutal counter that leaves a goblin staggering back in shock. His movements blur, almost dance-like, as he tears through the enemies in one relentless arc of steel. A shockwave trails in the wake of his strike, propelling bodies backward like ragdolls caught in a storm. Suho doesn't hesitate. The fear that once ruled his childhood heart is gone, replaced by instinct, by purpose, by a burning pulse of battle surging through every vein. I feel more alive than I did during my lifeless days, his mind echoes, clarity blooming amid the chaos. Blades swing. HP bars flicker, 118, then 84. Suho is hurt, but undeterred. He strikes back harder, slashing his way through the onslaught with every breath, defying the odds that stack higher with each passing second. His body moves on instinct now. 53 HP remains. Every blow is traded for another. Yet with blood streaked on his sleeve and a sword clenched tight in his grasp, Suho stands firm, backed against the edge of despair, staring down the next wave of enemies shrouded in a sinister red aura. He knows he's outnumbered, but he is no longer outmatched. Not anymore. Suddenly, cascading pings filled the air, system notifications flashed across his consciousness in rapid succession. A new skill had been acquired, Resilience level 0.1. And with it, a flurry of level-up messages, each one stacking upon the next like an avalanche of growth. His exhaustion was momentarily forgotten as the torrent of progression flooded through him. Around him, the eerie quiet of the aftermath spread. Goblin corpses lay strewn in the rubble and dust, their twisted bodies bathed in the faint glow of moonlight breaking through the shattered ceiling. The room no longer held chaos, only the heavy silence of victory. Yet amid the silence, a faint sound stirred. Beyond the lifeless bodies, somewhere in the shadows, a low growl rose, and then the gaping jaws of the goblin leader twitched. The trial may be complete, but something darker was still breathing. Breathing heavily, Suho slumped to the ground amidst the battlefield littered with fallen enemies. The light from the broken ceiling above poured over him like a spotlight on a lone survivor. His chest rose and fell, the ache in his muscles barely registering over the lingering adrenaline. The system's notification echoed in his mind, the timer hit 0. The trial was over. Quest completed. A weight lifted, but the pain remained. From the void, Baru's voice swelled with pride, laced with the restrained emotion of a guardian who had watched from the shadows. "Ugh, I'm really proud of you," he declared with unshakable certainty. "I, Baru, have never doubted that the young monarch would overcome this trial." Suho exhaled, dragging himself to his feet again, wincing at the soreness in his limbs. He narrowed his eyes at Baru's lingering presence and muttered under his breath, "So, you really are not helping me until the end." The final notification rings like a victory bell in the aftermath of battle. Your quest completion reward has arrived. The choices hover before him, accept or deny, but there's no hesitation. Leaning against the rubble, bruised but unbowed, he lifts his head and breathes one quiet word. Check. The screen updates, flickering with a golden glow. You will receive the following rewards. And then it appears, Runestone, Shadow Extraction. Suho's eyes narrow as he gazes at the luminous stone now glowing in his palm. The meaning settles in instantly. A runestone? So, if I use it, I can learn the Shadow Extraction skill. The familiar presence in the void watches, its voice echoing around him with restrained awe. Oh, the young monarch is getting Shadow Extraction. Suho nods thoughtfully, remembering the system's gifts, gifts he hadn't even realized he'd earned during the battle. One of them now stood out clearly. Now that I think about it, I did get a skill called Resilience while fighting as well. He pulls back the torn front of his shirt, revealing the glowing status information just above his skin. Skill, Resilience level 0.1. Passive skill, no mana required. You possess an indomitable level of resilience. Physical defense is increased by 20%. Suho's lips curl into a faint grin. Looks like I got skills on top of the level-up system I got when I awakened. He rises to his feet as the moment begins to crystallize in his mind. All the doubts, the fear, the feeling of powerlessness that once haunted him, washed away by the truth now burning in his veins. Compared to when he was a non-awakened, Suho feels like a cheat character reborn. The very leveling system that once guided the Shadow Monarch himself now pulses within him. A shadowy voice confirms what he's just come to realize. This level-up mechanism is based on the system the Monarch used in the past. It's a support system designed to ensure your safety as you grow, young Monarch. Suho exhales deeply, the weight of everything hitting him all at once. To put it simply, he murmurs, a hint of disbelief still clinging to his voice. I thought I was an unawakened one, but it turns out I'm the ultimate shadow heir? That's one way to put it. The voice responds gently. Suho answered with confidence. Yeah. Anyway, I accept the reward. He raises the runestone high above his head and breaks the runestone. The surface shatters like glass, a surge of dark energy bursting into the air. The light curls around his body like a living thing, wrapping his arm in swirling, black mist. A new notification etches itself into the air before him. Skill, Shadow Extraction has been learned. As the system window shimmers open before him, the text glows ominously, etching its promise into the void. Skill, Shadow Extraction. Shadow Authority. No mana required. Extract the mana from a lifeless body and turn it into a shadow soldier. The words crystallize in Suho's mind as he processes the implications. His eyes narrow, a silent storm of realization behind them. So, I can make shadow soldiers? He stares at the goblin corpse strewn at his feet, its twisted body barely cooled. A faint pulse of darkness hovers over it, visible only to him now. He's no longer just a hunter. He's a shadow wielder. Baru's voice emerges from behind, proud and resolute. It's a skill to turn corpses into soldiers like me. Shadow extraction is the true essence of the authority that created the current monarch. Monarch Sung Ji Woo. Suho turns that over in his head. Is it like a necromancer type? But something deeper stirs in him. This isn't just about reviving the dead. If I want to command soldiers, I need to hunt them first. So doesn't that mean I can only control those who are weaker than me? His gaze shifts to the slain goblin nearby, clawed hands still clenched in death. He lowers his arm, reaching out with certainty. I heard that summon-type skills don't look favorable in the hunter industry, yet despite that, this power calls to him. You can use shadow extraction on this target. He speaks the words, clear and steady. Shadow extraction. Please specify the command for the shadow extraction skill. Suho freezes mid-motion. Seriously, the annoyance flickering across his face. I need to come up with a separate command for this skill? How tedious. From the side, his wisp-like companion floats closer, its glowing eyes narrowing in thought. If it's a command, Baru chimes in gently, it should be direct. Suho closes his eyes for a breath, the energy gathering into him like the wind before a storm. Then, he lifts his arm. Power lashes around him like serpents of living night. The world stills. His lips part, and the single word echoes like thunder through the chamber. Arise. From darkness, something answers. The command echoed like thunder through the still air, arise. Dark tendrils of shadow crept from the ground, coiling like smoke around the lifeless goblin's corpse. From the heart of its still body, green flame-like energy burst forth, illuminating the cave in a ghostly hue. The creature, no longer bound to death, jerked once, then fully rose with glowing, soulless eyes. More began to rise. One by one, the shadows came alive, pulling themselves from the corpses around Suho. Their bodies shimmered with eerie green light, taking form with grotesque clarity, sharp claws, twisted muscles, and glowing glyphs along their limbs. They assembled like an army called from the abyss itself. Shadow Goblin, Level 1, Common Grade. Suho watched silently as the newborn shadows stood at attention, their glowing eyes locked onto him. His face remained still, part intrigued, part disappointed. So, this is the shadow extraction, he muttered. He glanced over his summoned creatures, tilting his head. It's not as impressive as I thought it would be. Baru hovered beside him with a hint of nervous energy, unsure how his monarch would react. The goblin shadows twitched awkwardly under Suho's gaze. One of them even looked smaller, almost comically so. Suho narrowed his eyes. Do they also get smaller? Yes, Baru answered, voice small. He sighed. How much weaker do they get? Just a little bit. Suho crouched beside one, studying its diminished form. It also says they disappear after a day. Baru suddenly panicked, eyes wide. No way. Don't you have a skill like shadow storage? Suho straightened, expression blank. No, I don't. Baru's glow dimmed. Lines of gloom streamed down his shadowed face. It seems that shadow abilities are influenced by intelligence, stats, and levels. Trying to reassure himself more than anyone else, he continued. This will be a really good skill later on. Really incredible skill. Suho glanced at him with a weary smile, patting him lightly on the shoulder. I get it. So don't be so down, Baru. A deep groan escapes Suho as he clutches his stomach. The hunger he had buried beneath battle instincts now claws its way to the surface. Ah, come to think of it, he hadn't eaten in 2 days. His breath hitches as the realization sinks in. His body might be evolving, gaining strength, powers, and skills, but it still craves the simple necessities. Turning his gaze to the familiar flicker of shadows beside him, Suho calls out with a tired voice. Baru, how can we get out of here? From the air beside him, Baru answers in his signature rasp, calm and composed. You can leave any time by using the Shadow Dungeon key. The tension that had bound Suho's body begins to loosen. He looks up toward the darkened sky filtering through the ruins above. The nightmare is over for now. Then, let's grab something to eat first, Suho says with quiet relief. Baru bows ever so slightly. Yes, young monarch. A notification window materializes in front of him. A simple prompt. Would you like to exit the Shadow Dungeon? Suho selects accept. A flash of light, and the scene fades to warmth. The air smells of antiseptic and warm broth. Suho exhales in bliss, a piece of food in hand, his cheeks glowing pink with satisfaction. He breathes. He's seated in a hospital cafeteria, scarfing down a tray of food like it's the finest gourmet meal on earth. I can't believe hospital food can taste this good, he mutters, halfway between wonder and shame. Baru floats by his side in silence, arms crossed, eyeing the tray with silent judgment. After a pause, the shadow servant speaks again. Young monarch, let me explain what we need to do next. His tone is serious now, tinged with urgency. We have been assigned 3 missions. Suho puts down his utensils and leans in, curious. So you're saying we need to go into dungeons and hunt these beasts? Baru's voice remains steady. First, we must protect the earth from otherworldly beasts. He lifts a finger, listing the first directive. If you hunt these beasts, your level will increase. And as you grow stronger, Earth will become safer. As Baru speaks, an image forms in Suho's mind of a battlefield swarmed by creatures of chaos, of himself standing tall in the center, cloaked in energy, sword drawn, path illuminated by ghostly fire. His thoughts were soon interrupted by Baru, laying out the next piece of the mission. And second, we must find the missing lady by any means necessary. A warm vision of his mother filled his thoughts. Her silhouette lingered like sunlight, a reminder of what was at stake. Is there any way to find my mother's location? He asked. If we keep hunting those beasts, Baru answered with unwavering certainty, we might eventually find a clue. Suho sighed. So, we'll have to enter dungeons after all. Baru's voice lowered to a serious tone. And third, something very important. In the shadowed depths of memory and mana, Baru's body pulsed with violet energy. It's to regain your strength, he confessed. The power I once wielded against the monarch. I want to show it to you. Suho's brows furrowed. How do I regain my strength? I can absorb some of the target's magical power and knowledge through consumption, Baru explained. It's an inefficient method compared to before I became a shadow soldier, but since I can't reclaim mana from you now, it's the only option. The clarity of purpose returned to Suho's eyes as he set his spoon down. Basically, we need to go into dungeons. His reflection on the silverware tray mirrored his growing determination. Dungeons, danger, and darkness lay ahead, but so did answers, and the power to reclaim everything he'd lost. Suho rose from his bed, resolve solidifying with every step. Let's prepare then, he said quietly. Baru floated beside him like a vigilant wraith, offering quiet counsel. To enter a dungeon, you need a hunter qualification. Go to the Hunter Association and get your magical power measured. The words echoed in Suho's mind as he stepped toward the window. Magical power measurement, he murmured. A cityscape bathed in amber light stretched before him, peaceful and unaware. His eyes narrowed in thought. I'm an awakener who continuously levels up, The sun dipped low over the city skyline, painting the horizon in golden hues as Suho gazed skyward, thoughts swirling. I wonder what grade I'll get. What if I get something like S rank? A flicker of hope danced in his chest, brief, fragile. Inside the Hunter Association facility, a woman in uniform regarded him with a neutral expression. Your magical power level is 46, she stated, offering no emotion. The verdict hit like a cold wave. You're an E-rank awakener. The weight of those words pressed heavily on his shoulders as he walked away, shadows stretching long in the fading light. He passed through the city's heartbeat, people moving around, unaware of his silent burden. Baru floated at his side, trying to explain, trying to comfort. The hunter's rank is determined by their magical power. It's natural for the rank to be lower compared to your actual abilities since you focus on power stats. But Suho didn't need comfort. You don't have to comfort me. It just makes me feel worse. He paused, glancing down at his hand. With my shadow abilities in this rank, can an E-rank like me really protect Earth? Baru's voice rose with assurance, glowing eyes steady. But you have level-ups, young monarch. Suho stared down at his hand, its faint tremble betraying the frustration building within. The red scratches on his palm, remnants of his earlier trials, echoed how little he had progressed in others' eyes. His thoughts grew heavy. He'd heard the rumors, E-rank and F-rank hunters were almost never selected for expeditions. Even entering dungeons was already a monumental task for someone of his rank. The weight of that truth pressed down on him like iron chains. His gaze sharpened with a glint of desperation. Ah, he muttered, realization creeping into his voice. But just before he could dwell deeper in despair, a flicker of hope pierced the fog. Baru floated forward, his glow gentle, yet firm. There might be one way. As Baru looked on with curiosity, Suho began to explain. Dungeon raids weren't just reckless charges into danger. They followed a strict structure, divided by roles. His words painted a clearer picture in Suho's mind. There was the assault team, the frontline warriors who dove into the depths, clashing directly with dungeon beasts. Behind them marched the recovery team, scavenging the remains of slain monsters, extracting cores and supplies. And lastly, at the very rear, worked the mining team, those who harvested the rare minerals embedded in dungeon walls and floors. Suho continued, his voice calm, calculated. Among these groups, the recovery and mining teams don't require strong combat prowess. E-rank hunters can be enlisted in those roles. Suho's eyes lit up with renewed purpose. There was a path after all, one carved through the background, but a path nonetheless. As the next day dawned, Suho found himself among miners deep within a glowing cavern, bathed in the eerie light of crystallized mana. The rhythmic clang of pickaxes echoed through the chamber. Pulling off his helmet for a moment, the cool air brushing against his damp forehead. A voice called out behind him. Another miner approached. Thanks for the introduction, the man said, shifting his hard hat. I just awakened recently, and you're the only awakener I know. The two stood in the blue-lit shadows of the crystal mine, two low-rank awakeners who had barely stepped onto the long road ahead. But for Suho, that first step meant everything. A place to start. A way to grow. And deep in his core, the fire continued to burn. Nearby, another voice joined the conversation, confident, but humble. The man introduced himself as the training instructor, Lim Dokyun, a member of Korea University of the Arts and also an E-rank awakened. The revelation landed softly, yet carried weight. I'm glad to have an awakened senior nearby. Thanks to you, I can work in the dungeon like this. As the two exchanged words, Suho stood quietly, absorbing their gratitude, watching the way even the weakest found resolve in each other's presence. For a moment, the air was still. Then, Lim looked up once more personal this time. Suho. Suho turned. Yes. Bowing deeply, the man's voice carried sincerity. I'm sorry about what happened during the arts incident at the Korean University. His voice echoed with remorse beneath the cool shimmer of the crystals, an apology long overdue, finally finding its moment. The memory flashed through his mind like a wound reopening. Terrified eyes, locked doors, people in peril, and himself, crouched in guilt outside the door. Still trembling with the weight of his regret, he kneeled before Suho and whispered, I'm sorry I couldn't do anything. But instead of condemnation, there was quiet understanding. Suho's voice was calm and firm as he urged the man to lift his head. You're also an E-ranked awakened. The man looked up, wide-eyed with disbelief. The Hunter Association advises E-rank awakeners like you and me to flee at full strength if we encounter beasts, Suho added gently. You were just following the guidelines, weren't you? The man blinked. You're an E-rank? Yes. My magical power level is 46. It's low even among E ranks. Shocked, the man could hardly believe it. My power is lower than yours? Lim Dokyun's eyes widened, a memory flashing before him like a lightning strike. That day, amid the crumbling chaos and fleeing students, he remembered. There was someone on the rooftop, a figure standing against the tide. Could it have been? His thoughts clashed with disbelief. That can't be, he muttered internally. But the vision was clear, Suho clashing against a beast, alone atop the roof, while everyone else ran for their lives. I think I saw Suho fighting a beast. While I was running away, the memory clawed at his conscience. Could it really have happened that way? Snapping back to the present, Dokyun stole a glance at Suho. Was that courage or desperation back then? Either way, it gnawed at his pride. Did I see that wrong? The question hovered in his mind. As if drawn to the weight of that thought, Suho stepped forward, striking at the glowing crystals with silent resolve. The sharp sound of his pickaxe echoed through the chamber. Dokyun exhaled softly. Well, if an E-rank actually survived by charging at a beast, that's even more impressive. He couldn't help but admit it aloud. Beside him, the little black shadow chimed in with unwavering faith. Right. The young monarch is exceptional. A jolt of alarm suddenly split through the silence. Huh. A beast. Both men turned sharply. Something stirred deeper within the tunnel. Why did you suddenly appear? Suho questioned, glancing toward the floating shadow creature who had materialized next to them. The monarch we follow is as weak as a larva, the shadow answered bluntly. I need to stay close and protect him to ensure his safety. Dokyun's eyes narrowed as his understanding deepened. Wait, did you awaken as a summoner-type hunter? Suho nodded awkwardly. Yes, well, it seems so. Dokyun smiled slightly, sensing hope buried beneath the layers of uncertainty. Many E-rank hunters don't have skills, so it's fortunate. Suho walks alongside Lim Dokyun, the flickering light glinting off their hard hats. Lim chuckles, rubbing the back of his neck. By the way, I have a running skill. Suho smirks. Oh, so that's why you were able to escape so well. A beat of silence. Lim's face falls. Suho quickly adds with a laugh. No, I'm just kidding, Hyung. A faint smile flickers across Lim's face, breaking the tension. Shadows ripple behind them, not from monsters, but from the small black wisp following Suho, its presence quiet yet always watchful. Suho's expression hardens as he watches it dance along the stone. He's reminded of what's missing, of what's not here. As expected, the feeling he sensed is completely broken. Come to think of it, he pauses, his eyes narrowing as he steps toward a branching path lined with glowing crystal. This is my first time in a dungeon other than the Shadow Dungeon, and the difference between them is chillingly stark. A distant corridor yawns open beneath glimmering crystal light, the air dense with silence. But the silence is deceptive. Shadows writhe in the depths of the cave, and tension tightens in the marrow of every hunter nearby. I wonder if the assault team is hunting beasts up ahead. The thought echoes, heavy with unease, as cold mist coils across the cavern floor. Elsewhere in the dungeon, a group of hunters surveys the aftermath of a recent skirmish. Wolf corpses litter the cavern floor, their bodies sprawled and motionless. This dungeon is empty, one of them mutters, gripping his weapon tightly. Yeah, since earlier, only wolf beasts have been appearing. Their voices are tired but focused, the edge of wariness never leaving. Wolf pelts are scattered around, but they carry little value. Wolf pelts aren't worth much, one of them grunts. Still, the work must go on. Magic crystals sometimes lie within the carcasses. It's a gamble, but one they can't ignore. Sometimes there are carcasses with magic crystals, so we have to keep working hard, another adds. They press on, deeper into the gloom. Don't be too discouraged. You won't know until you reach the end of the dungeon. The faint glow of luminous crystals reflected off the dungeon walls as a member of the assault team broke away from the path. His voice, sharp with intrigue, cut through the silence as he called out with urgency. Captain, there's something inside on this side path. His excited grin betrayed the kind of discovery that could change everything. With a confident gesture, he signaled toward the shadows. Look at this. The tunnel deepened into a forgotten chamber, where ancient stone gave way to a circular platform embedded with glowing runes. At its center, a strange artifact pulsed with an ominous crimson light, a mechanical structure, circular and dormant, as if shielding a forgotten relic beneath its seal. The air grew heavier, colder, charged with mystery. The group of hunters cautiously stepped into the hidden ruin, eyes wide with disbelief. What is this place? One muttered. Why is there such a ruin here? Asked another, scanning the alien architecture. Confusion echoed among them. No one had seen anything like this, Not in this dungeon. Not in any known expedition. Shouldn't we request some support from outside? One of them suggested, glancing around. But the leader narrowed his eyes, focusing on the device. There's no sign of beasts detected by my skill for now. Still, the presence of a structure so out of place demanded answers. If there are no beasts, why is there such a structure here? We need to find out, the leader resolved, stepping forward. Do you think? Could there be treasure hidden instead of a boss monster? Then, the light shifted, revealing it. At the center of the ruin stood a sword. Embedded in a glowing pedestal, it radiated an intense energy, unlike anything they had seen before. Beautiful, terrifying, otherworldly. Crazy, one hunter whispered, breathless. I can't believe it's really here. More gathered, drawn like moths to a flame. Wow, what is this? A weapon. This looks amazing. Their footsteps echoed as they circled the weapon. Tension replaced awe. We'll need to appraise it to be sure, but, one observed, his voice trembling slightly, it looks like an incredible weapon just by looking at it. But a more cautious voice broke through. Such treasures often come with traps. We should handle it carefully. The warning barely left his lips before Kim Yongjun stepped forward, eyes burning with reckless eagerness. Come out. I'll pull it out. In an instant, he moved. Huh? Wait, Kim Yongjun. Someone shouted, alarmed, but too late. His hand gripped the hilt, and the ruin began to tremble. As the eerie glow of the crimson aura pulsed and shimmered around the ominous blade, Kim Yongjun's hand reached forward without hesitation. His eyes gleamed with greed and confidence as his fingers wrapped around the hilt, unaware of the storm he was about to unleash. A warning rang out behind him. Hey, there could be traps on the treasures, but it was drowned by his own pride. Even if there are traps, I'm a C-rank tank, so I can handle it. The words echoed with arrogance. The moment the weapon was drawn, everything changed. The air itself seemed to scream as a surge of violent energy erupted from the sword. It lashed out in every direction, a burst of raw power wrapped in black and red tendrils. Kim Yongjun's confident expression instantly shattered. His body trembled. Beads of sweat trailed down his face as panic overtook him. The blade, now fully unsheathed, stood like a cursed relic, a beacon of fury summoned from a nightmare. Suddenly, the world around him turned blood red. Spiked ridges emerged from the floor, surrounding him like a predator's maw. Yongjun stumbled back, breath caught in his throat, as unblinking, reptilian eyes began to glow in the darkness. One pair, then three, then countless more. Massive shadows slithered forward with terrifying grace, yellow irises narrowing with hatred. All eyes locked onto the awakened sword. And then it began to rise. The weapon levitated upward as if possessed, its red glow coalescing into the shape of a man. No, a beast cloaked in fury. The blade floated like a curse suspended by wrath itself. The soldiers around the circle remained unaware, one of them even sighing. Looks like there are no traps. His voice trembled with misplaced relief. From behind, a voice full of cold rage pierced the air. Kim Yongjun. How dare you? Yongjun turned, only to be met with glowing red eyes and inhuman movement. In the blink of an eye, dark tendrils burst outward from the cursed weapon, sweeping across the floor like death incarnate. Crimson slashes tore through the air. Screams erupted. One by one, the men collapsed, overtaken, consumed, transformed. Their faces twisted as they lost themselves to whatever had awakened. Who dares covet the Fang monarch's sword? Boomed a voice from the darkness. And from the center of the storm, it emerged, a beast in humanoid armor, swathed in glowing red veins of power. Eyes like burning coals. The same sword now pulsing with life in his grasp. He wasn't a guardian. He wasn't a monster. He was the resurrected will of the Fang monarch himself. The eerie silence shatters as the cursed words echo through the air, commands etched in blood and malice. Kill intruders who enter the Fang Lord's territory. The voice is not shouted, but embedded in every jagged wall of the dungeon, vibrating with a deep, ancient fury. Terror takes hold of the hunters. Their eyes widen as the towering figure of the Fang monarch's sword-bearer lunges. Blood arcs violently through the shadows, staining the very air with crimson. Screams rise, but they are drowned out by the repeated command pulsing through the air like war drums. Kill. With monstrous force, the possessed warrior rips through their ranks. His sword, crackling with demonic energy, slashes in wide, merciless strokes. Faces twist in horror. Some stumble back, some try to flee, but the word continues to drill into their minds: kill. 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 Elsewhere, crystal walls fracture as raw power begins to surge. Deep within another corridor, miners freeze mid-task, heads whipping toward the source of the shattering sound. Huh. One of them mutters, wide-eyed. What's that? From the shattered spires of mana crystals, forms emerge, figures cloaked in spectral green flame. Beings with glowing eyes and twisted grins, the summoned. The workers stare in disbelief as Suho's summons fill the chamber. Did he have a summoning skill like that? One asks quietly, awe threading his voice. Behind them, the dark silhouette of the boy stands unmoving, his gaze fixed forward as the creatures begin to shift into formation. I've heard that usually summoners can only control one, maybe two, the other mutters, stunned. Summoning three is kinda, his voice trails off. Including the talking ghost, that makes four. Hyung's thoughts churned with disbelief as he observed Suho from a distance. That kind of overwhelming power, it didn't fit the frame of an ordinary hunter. Wasn't this just too abnormal? Suho stood silently, his expression calm and composed, the faint glow of shadow energy radiating from the familiars hovering nearby. Shadow extraction, a skill that should have been inconvenient due to its reliance on corpses, was now functioning like clockwork. Even without fresh kills, they had goblin bodies from earlier raids to work with. Efficient. Tireless. These shadow soldiers carried out menial labor without complaint, making them ideal assets in the dungeon's depths. Baru hovered in the air beside them, his eerie glow unblinking. Suho glanced over at the ant soldier, thoughtful. Baru, just as you said, Suho said quietly, shadow extraction really is a useful skill. But the former monarch's expression twisted in comical protest. Please don't praise me while making me do all the dirty work, young monarch. Suho smirked, ignoring the remark. By the way, didn't we enter this dungeon to level up? It was true, under association rules. E-rank hunters couldn't legally enter dungeons alone. But everyone knew the measurement devices had flaws. They'd only been around for a short time, and already people were gaming the system. Since the ranks started, I always thought they had bugs. I was planning on leveling up and getting remeasured properly. Baru's eyes narrowed, glowing coldly. Are you referring to recovering my power? Suho gave a slight grin. You said consuming magic helped you recover, right? These magic stone fragments, they have magic power too, don't they? He motioned to the shimmering shards that glittered across the cave floor, jagged crystals that pulsed with faint blue light, scattered in clusters like scattered treasure. Baru stared at them, hesitating. You won't help with extraction? Suho teased. Then at least pick them up and eat them. A long, exasperated hiss escaped the Baru. Screech, he glared at the glowing stones, torn between dignity and necessity. Then, he began to consume. And so the dungeon echoed once more, not with the roar of monsters, but with the crunch of crystals beneath the maw of a sulking, reluctant monarch. A chill ran through the chamber as Baru stiffened midair, his glowing eyes flickering uneasily. Young monarch, he gasped, halting in the midst of gathering magic stones. Suho turned, sensing the urgency. What now? Baru's voice dropped, almost a whisper. I just felt the presence of a monarch. Suho's expression darkened. You mean, my father? But Baru shook his head, gaze tense and sharp. No, there isn't just one monarch-level being. If it were our monarch, my power would have been instantly replenished. Far away, the echoes of footsteps carried down a tunnel, two miners making their way through a jagged corridor lined with pale crystal. The smell of this batch is familiar, one of them muttered under his breath, unease creeping into his voice. Their heads turned as a new sound emerged from deeper within the dungeon. A low vibration. The scrape of claws. The shifting of something vast. What's that sound? That direction is definitely. Eyes widened. The way the raid party went. Then silence. Out of the darkness, from the place the adventurers had vanished into, something stirred. Glowing crimson eyes blinked into existence. One set, then three, then five, gleaming like malevolent stars in the pitch black. A scream tore through the stillness. One of the hunters stumbled back, his weapons trembling in his hands as a massive shadow lunged toward him. Towering red beasts emerged, their jaws wide, dripping with saliva, eyes burning with feral hatred. Hey, it's a monster. But this was no ordinary dungeon creature. These were something far more primal, more cursed. And they had awakened. Panic ignited like wildfire as the growls of monsters echoed violently through the tunnels. One of the miners screamed, eyes wide with disbelief. Why are the monsters all the way here? His voice trembled, barely louder than the pounding of his feet against stone. Others around him erupted into motion, driven by primal fear. Everyone, run away. The narrow corridor erupted into chaos. Helmets clattered, boots scraped, and desperate shouts filled the air. Then a scream rang out, piercing, raw. A man, frozen in terror, faced down a towering beast with red glowing eyes. His arms flailed as he screamed, "Don't come any closer. The monster lunged with a deafening roar, its massive jaws opening wide. With terrifying speed, it struck. The man was thrown backward like a rag doll, hitting the ground hard. Sparks flew as claws scraped the stone beside him. A man, quaking in place, choked on his breath. "Save me." His voice was no louder than a whisper, but the plea was raw with dread. But before the beast could strike again, before death could claim him, a blur moved in from the shadows. Suho surged forward, his face resolute, his eyes burning with urgency. "Suho," the man cried out, barely believing his eyes. "I'll buy some time." Suho shouted without hesitation, pivoting to intercept the charging monsters. "Evacuate outside." The grateful voice came weakly behind him. "Thank you." Suho launched himself into the fray, drawing the monsters toward him like a flame in the darkness. Around him, the others scrambled past, the narrow tunnel alive with motion and desperation as one figure stood defiant against the nightmare. Suho's eyes narrowed sharply, a chilling calm rising in his gaze as he took in the approaching threat. The creatures' names glowed in the air with a sinister orange hue, steel fang lichens, and Suho understood immediately what that meant. Orange names. Hostile intent. A strength on par with the Deerank beast he'd fought at Korean Art University. But unlike then, he wasn't panicked now. These lichens were dangerous, but they were also manageable. A breath. Stillness in the chaos. Suho's mind sharpened. If he was fighting alone, this was no longer a situation to fear, it was one to conquer. Behind him, another hunter hesitated, unsure whether to flee or stand. He had Suho's unwavering back, then made his decision. "You're okay to run away too, you know," he murmured, torn. But as he looked into Suho's eyes, steady and focused even in the presence of death, something stirred in him. "Suho, you're trying to help people evacuate on your own. I won't run away alone anymore." Resolved, he stepped forward. Suho gave a brief nod, not wasting time. Then, "Please help me when I'm in danger." With those words, the air cracked with energy. The shadows beside him rippled, and 3 more goblin figures emerged, loyal, silent, and armed. The man's eyes widened. Another 3 goblins? Suho wasn't finished. He raised a hand and whispered to the system within. "Inventory." A brilliant light flared in the air. A magical grid appeared, revealing a selection of weapons. Among them, blades collected from fallen goblins in the shadow dungeon. He reached for one and drew it out. Better than a pickaxe, he thought. The cold metal gleamed with a sharp edge and deadly intent. The hunter behind him stumbled back, stunned. "You can even summon weapons? What kind of summoning skill does Suho also have?" There was no time to explain. Suho tightened his grip, eyes locked onto the lichens. With a powerful step forward, he lunged into battle, no longer a student, no longer the hunted. He was the shadow rising. The shriek of steel and fury echoed, their twisted figures snarling with hunger for battle. Behind them, one of the miners stared, wide-eyed and frozen in awe and disbelief at the army born from darkness. Suho, unfazed, dashed ahead in a blur, his blade raised with deadly purpose. A sharp clang rang out as his weapon collided with the steel fang lichen's massive claws, sparks scattering like fireflies from the point of impact. Muscles tensed, and time seemed to slow. With perfect precision, he twisted his body, spinning midair in a fluid arc, his blade cutting through the monster's flesh in a brilliant flash of blue energy. A moment later, a glowing notification echoed across the battlefield. "The steel fang lichen has been defeated." A stunned silence fell. One of the miners gasped in disbelief, surrounded by 3 goblin shadows who hissed in eerie satisfaction. The impossible had been made real. Then, Suho's voice broke the silence, calm, resonant, unshakable. "Arise." His command was more than a word. It was power incarnate. Blue flames surged across the lifeless body of the fallen lichen, black mist coiling upward like tendrils of rebirth. The remaining lichens stepped back instinctively, their instincts screaming danger as Suho stood tall, his cape billowing, aura burning, and his will absolute. From beneath him, death stirred and rose again. The shadows coiled tighter around Suho's feet, his presence steadily growing more commanding as his eyes gleamed with cold resolve. From the dark beside him, the small black wisp hovered excitedly, its glowing eyes wide with awe. "Oh, young monarch, already becoming familiar with the combat method using shadow powers." Suho clenched his fist with calm intensity as his thoughts crystallized. Extraction and summoning, they didn't consume mana. That was the brilliance of this new power. And as his magical power grew, so too would his army. As goblins and lichens lunged toward him with snapping jaws and snarls, Suho moved like a phantom through their ranks. With a swift step, Suho lunged once more. His blade cleaved through the hide of a steel fang leakin. Blood sprayed. Muscles tore. And with a final surge of might, the beast collapsed beneath his feet. The familiar golden notification shimmered before him. The steel fang leakin has been defeated. He didn't hesitate. Arise. Behind him, another goblin disappeared, summoned by Suho's will. The worker miner who had been cowering beside the wall gasped in shock, watching the scene with disbelief in his eyes. The goblin clambered upright with a strange guttural cry, equal parts confusion and despair as it looked around, seemingly dazed by its second chance at life. Then it wailed. Another system message echoed through the stillness. The steel fang leakin has been defeated. The goblin stood there, eyes watering, overwhelmed by the strange fate it now bore. Notification: your level has increased. And somewhere in the shadows, Suho's power continued to evolve quietly, steadily, on the path to becoming an army unto himself. A brilliant surge of blue energy swirled like smoke around Suho's commanding figure. With a voice that seemed to stir the very shadows beneath him, he uttered the single word, "Arise." And from the cold, blood-stained ground, the fallen lichens responded. Their once feral forms reanimated in eerie, crackling shadow light. Their once glowing red eyes now glowed with spectral blue. Suho stood at the center of this otherworldly army, cloaked in power and unshaken resolve. The miner's voice cracked in awe and disbelief. "So, you..." Words failed him, eyes wide with fear and reverence. This wasn't the timid E-rank he had come to know. Suho turned his head slightly, but said nothing. The silence only deepened the mystery of the one who now commanded death itself. The other man's thoughts spiraled. It's not the physical ability of an E-rank, he realized with a nervous gulp. And on top of that, a skill that commands dead monsters. He clenched his fists, shaken. I was too excited. How should I even explain this? Well, Suho mumbled awkwardly, searching for the right words. But behind his glasses, the other man's expression darkened with suspicion. It's just that. I'm a pretty good E-rank, but... He couldn't ignore the discrepancy. Could it be that Suho is a false ranker who intentionally falsified his rank? Suddenly, Suho's eyes snapped wide open as a sharp ping echoed in his mind. A system window blinked to life. Notification: a quest has arrived. Another message appeared before him, urgent and ominous. Quest guide: emergency quest. Defeat the enemy. An entity with murderous intent towards the player has been detected nearby. Secure your safety by defeating it. Number of enemies to defeat: 1. Number of enemies defeated: 0. Suho's heart pounded. A quest. He stepped cautiously toward the dark, gaping tunnel ahead, the air growing heavier with each stride. It says there's one more enemy to defeat, he thought. I've already taken down all the lichens I could see. He squinted deeper into the shadows, his steps echoing on the cavern floor. Could there be more enemies? The cold stone beneath his feet crunched gently as he moved forward and further into the unknown. The eerie silence is broken as Suho and his companion come face to face with a new figure, one cloaked in steel armor and bathed in the faint glow of crimson light. They both stop mid-step, eyes wide in cautious curiosity. Huh. The shorter man mutters, as the armored warrior steps forward through the darkness, his silhouette stark against the murky light of the battlefield. There's no mistaking it. He's from the raid party. Suho narrows his gaze, tension building in his jaw. Something about the man's presence feels off. Before they can ask anything more, the man in the cap speaks up in relief. You're alive. What on earth is going on? But Suho's instincts scream louder than the man's voice. Hyung, wait a moment. His words trail off as a sudden, sickening pressure ripples through the air. In the next instant, red. Blazing red light erupts from the stranger's visor, casting an ominous glow on his now twisted face. Hyung, it's dangerous. Suho yells, but the warning comes half a second too late. Huh, the man utters in confusion, then it hits. The corrupted figure lunges, blade ablaze, a monstrous grin spread across his face. The air splits open from the force of his strike. But Suho is already moving. With a surge of speed, he grabs his ally and dives aside just in time. The crimson blade slams into the earth, sending shards of stone and dust flying in a devastating shockwave. The ground shakes. The monster's strike echoes like thunder across the shattered silence. Suho's eyes narrow. This was no ally. This was the real enemy. Suho's voice breaks through the tension like a command from a seasoned general. Wolf squat. Attack. His sharp cry stirs the glowing blue shadows around him, and without hesitation, the spectral beasts charge, erupting in a synchronized blitz toward the armored trader. The possessed hunter braces for impact, but he's too slow. One after another, the summoned wolves crash into him with devastating force, their ethereal fangs slashing through the corrupted armor in a cascade of blue and red sparks. As Suho retreats with Hyung in tow, his boots skimming the frost-streaked ground, he casts a quick glance behind. His expression tightens. Damn. Another possessed hunter? A flicker of alarm cuts through Suho's thoughts. Since when did it become fashionable for hunters to turn into monsters? The grotesque transformation had warped the man's face, and now the name floating above him pulses with a menacing red glow. Fong of Rakan, possessed. His gaze locks on the crimson-colored name. And the color of the name. That hue wasn't just for show. A red name wasn't merely a cosmetic detail, it was a warning. A red name indicated lethality, ruthlessness, unrestrained threat. He remembers vividly how overwhelming it had been facing that same red glow back at the Korean Art University, back when he barely scraped through. This time, it's different, but not by much. The danger is just as real. In this situation, he thinks it's rational to flee with Hyung. But even as his instincts scream retreat, Suho's thoughts drift to the words that had echoed before. Baru, that doesn't mean it's a monarch like my father, right? The shadow wavers beside him, floating with a faint pulse of light. It has power, Baru replies calmly, but it's far from being a monarch. That doesn't mean it's an opponent you can handle at this stage. Suho exhales, gaze narrowing. That's good. He steadies his hand over the floating panel of his shadow inventory, drawing confidence from the shadows around him. Baru's glowing eyes widen, a faint spark of revelation flickering. Young monarch. Could it be? The wind tore past Suho's ears as he sprinted forward, icy blue wisps of shadow energy flaring around his limbs. Each step left behind glowing trails of power, the momentum of his determination building with every stride. His thoughts raced alongside him, not with fear, but clarity. The system, it was never meant to be a crutch. It was a companion to his growth, a forge to temper him. If it had issued him a quest, then that meant it believed in his ability to overcome it. If this was the path that would lead him to his father, then he would face anything. A surge of mana erupted around possessed hunter, and the world darkened for a heartbeat. In that moment, he leapt, his body swallowed in a vortex of darkness. The black wolves around lunged with feral intensity, a synchronized pack of vengeance and loyalty. Their fangs gleamed like blades under the crimson light, and their howl was a war cry echoing through the cave's stone walls. From the darkness emerged the monster, its eyes glowing with feral madness, jagged fangs bared in a predatory grin. The possessed hunter, no longer human, roared as he met the onslaught. Blades collided. Fangs tore. Darkness surged. The cave shook. And amidst it all, Suho stood, his presence commanding, his will unwavering. As the light dimmed from the aftermath of the clash, he emerged again, gripping his weapon tight, stance low, and centered among the scattered remains of fallen swords. Baru hovered silently at his side. Suho's eyes narrowed. His voice was low, steady. I'll defeat this, red-named enemy here, and become stronger. The glow in his eyes was no longer the flicker of a boy chasing purpose. It was the blaze of a monarch rising. Chapter end here. For more, like, share, and subscribe.